Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful.
Welcome to this episode of On Farm. It's Monty here, sitting in my truck, top of the hill, with a blizzard blowing around about. Between that, lockdown, and, just all the kind of serious things happening around us at the moment, and we covered, climate change, Brexit, the last couple of episodes. Hope you've enjoyed them, but they were on the serious side. We decided for this episode, we would do something a little bit different. Give you a wee bit of entertainment, hopefully. Basically, since the start of lockdown last year, as it were, SAYFC, Scottish Young Farmers, have been running occasional sort of live events via Facebook. Young Farmers is all about meeting up and socialising, and, if they can't do it in person, then virtual has to be the next best thing. So, last week, they did a session with Rob Wainwright as a guest speaker. And Rob, as some of you will know, certainly those of you of my kind of vintage, is a former Scotland rugby captain, played for the Lions, flanker, and Rob now farms on the beautiful Isle of Coll. Rob was also a teammate and a great friend now of Doddy Weir. So Rob is a bit of a hero and a leading light in the fundraising effort that Doddy's involved with to help him and others battle MND. At the moment, as you'll hear from Rob, they're running a Scotland-wide competition to get everyone involved in exercising and raising money for the My Name's Doddy Foundation through the whole of January. I'll not say much more about that because you're going to hear from Rob. I believe the fundraising is paying off, and only last week there was a very welcome piece of news about a major breakthrough from Edinburgh University. As you'll hear, it's great to see that money making a difference, basically. For now, you might be glad to hear this. That's enough for me. I'm going to hand you over for pretty much the rest of this episode to brother and sister team Leanne and Ali Brunton. Both are young farmers, members of their clubs in Fife. Ali farms in Fife and also, I believe, plays a bit of rugby. And Leanne grew up on the family farm too. And she's now a sports physiotherapist in Edinburgh, working with rugby players at SRU. So, we decided that between them, what a perfect pair to host the chat with Rob Wainwright for an SAYFC on the sofa evening.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to our latest Facebook Live event. The hosts this evening are myself, Leanne Brunton, and my brother, Ali Brunton. We're excited that this evening's event will be recorded for the On Farm podcast, which will be released on Monday. So a big thanks to everyone over at Scene and Heard for your help.
I'd now like to introduce our guest for the evening, Rob Wainwright. Rob was capped 37 times for the Scottish rugby team and also toured with the British and Irish Lions to South Africa in 1997. Since retiring from rugby, Rob has moved into agriculture and is now farming on the Isle of Coll in the Inner Hebrides. So over to you, Rob.
Good evening, Ali, Leanne. Lovely to be here, and greetings from an amazing day on the Isle of Coll. The way the weather works, if it's lovely here, it probably means it's been horrible with you. So bad luck on that, but delighted to be here and look forward to answering questions, talking about farming on the Isle of Coll, talking maybe about some rugby stuff from yesteryear, and possibly about Doddy Aid as well, the big event that we're organising for my great friend and former teammate Doddy Weir, who's MND. We will all be aware of, I'm sure.
If you would just, you could kick us off from life at Glenalmond, or...
Exactly, yeah. Well, was born many years ago, 55 years ago in Perth, and was lucky enough to be brought up at Glenalmond College, where my father was a teacher, which is a beautiful part of rural Perthshire, and B is has an amazing set of facilities for a young man to grow up with access to pools, squash courts, rugby pitches, gyms, etc. So truly blessed to have been brought up there, and subsequently went to the school and then went down to study medicine at Cambridge when I left the school. And I don't think I don't know when my rugby ambitions started, but I do remember going on a skiing holiday with Dr. Patterson Brown from Hoyk, whose son I was at school with when I was 14. And he asked me what my ambitions were, and I said I wanted to get a rugby blue for Cambridge, because that's what my father had done. He got a £5 note, which was a lot of money for a 14-year-old back then. And he signed it and said, when you get a blue for Cambridge, you come back to me and I'll give you another £5. One of his other sons was probably at Cambridge at the time and about to get a blue himself. So I stored my £5 and went down to Cambridge. In my first term there, which was the rugby term, I had a knee injury, so I wasn't actually able to play rugby. So I was desperate to get a blue in anything. That's what the way things are in sporting circles down at Cambridge University. So I joined the boxing club, and I wasn't a very good boxer, but I could run around the ring quite the thing. And I managed to get into the varsity match boxing team, which was a 9-bout competition, which Cambridge hadn't won for 9 years. And it was in the Guildhall in Cambridge, which was a bit of a bear pit. And if we talk about great sporting occasions that I've witnessed or been involved in my life, this would be right up there in the top 5. Because when I went into the ring, it was 4-all, as we started with the light welterweight or whatever the lightest weight is, the bantam weights, and worked our way up to the heavyweights, which is where I was. And you didn't even need to be that heavy to be a heavyweight. I think the lower boundary of heavyweight was 12 stone 8. And I think I just scraped into heavyweight. But when I came in, we were 4-all, and there were, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of drunken students from both sides there, but they were baying for blood. And as luck would have it, a lucky punch in the second round put down the poor South African chap from Oxford who I was fighting against. And I won it, and it's the first time I've ever experienced, sporting euphoria to that level. It was an unbelievable moment to be, carried out the ring on drunken shoulders and the toast of the town for one night. So I started off my sporting career post school with a boxing blue, and then subsequently, as my knee got better, I managed to get into the rugby team and earned my £5 from Dr. Patterson Brown from Hoyt. And when he did it, he said, I could give you this one, but do you want to play double and quits and see if you can get a Scotland cap? And if you get a Scotland cap, then I'll give you 2 £5s, 2 more £5s. So there was quite a gap. Given this bet was made when I was 14, I didn't get my first cap until I was 26. It was quite a gap. Sorry, but I did eventually break in to the Scotland setup towards the end of my 6 years at Cambridge University studying medicine. So I was stuck down in Cambridge, which is a beautiful town, but it's not really the sort of countryside around it that a person from Scotland would be used to. And I was ready to come home, but I began to, be on the edge of the Scotland setup, and I was lucky enough to go to the Hong Kong Sevens in 1989 with the Barbarians, and Finlay Calder was the captain of the team, and actually had just been appointed Lions captain for the 1989 Lions tour to Australia. So it was huge excitement to be playing with him. And the key thing I got from it is that I was only 24 at that time, but beginning to think that international rugby might not ever be for me because I hadn't made my full break. But Finlay told me he didn't get his first cap until he was 29, which he was in my position in the back row for Scotland. So that was a huge lift for me. And 2 years later, I did get my first cap. I still had quite a few injuries to contend with through my career, but played for the next 8 seasons on and off for Scotland, and was lucky enough to go on the 1997's British Lions. Kind of sets you up for life being involved in a tour like that, particularly with the Living with the Lions video, which was such a powerful and probably first of its kind reality. What's it like behind the scenes, and we were very pally. The whole way the tour was set up, it was extremely well managed by Fran Cotton, and we were extremely well coached by Jim Telfer and Ian McGeechan. But the camera team are very much part of the touring team. So as a result, they got access that you could only dream of. I always laugh because the language on a rugby tour isn't necessarily the cleanest, and they decided to keep it very honest, the video. And I remember a lot of people buying it to give to their kids on Christmas 1997, and I think a sneak preview, it was deemed probably unsuitable for young boys of 13 or 14. It was it really was fly on the wall, exactly as it happened, and a very powerful video, and wonderful to be involved in. All careers come to an end, sporting careers. So in 1999 or 1998, I pretty much finished, and we'd been looking for somewhere up the West Coast, which is an area that I've always loved, and the place that happened to be for sale was rather inconveniently on a small island in the Hebrides, the Isle of Coll. And so we ended up on an island, and we moved up here on the 1st of October 1999 with a 10-week-old baby and 10-day-old baby, and 3 kids under the age of 5, and moved into a caravan outside a ruined farmhouse and 3,500 acres of a wonderful farm, which was mainly very boggy moorland and hadn't got a fence that was upright, anywhere in the whole of it, and was just a big project, which was still ongoing 20 years later. I think I know a wee bit more now than I did then, but the great thing about farming is you're always learning, and it's taken us that long to build a system that the animals are happy with in terms of getting the best out of them on the ground that we've got, and I'm happy with. And we've now got enough to keep me busy as a single-handed farmer. We've got 450 breeding ewes, which are Clin cross Cheviots, and about a third of them get put to a motley collection of Clin and Cheviot cross and pure tups, and then the rest of them go to Texel or Texel cross Charolais tups to produce good lambs, just for the storing. We started off with blue-grey cattle, and we did this bull and we did that bull, and then we finally saw sense and got a ling bull, and I think we're on about a third or fourth ling bull, and we're now very happily breeding as many as we need to the ling bull to give us replacements, and the rest go to a Simmental to produce Simling heifers, which are a very popular breeding heifer, which we sell at Oban. And we've just jumped in at the deep end and bought our first Charolais from Gretna House, where my pal Ali Houston assures me that his breeding lines are easy calving. So we could talk in 3 months' time, and I could give you my thoughts on it then. I'm very excited to see his easy calving, short gestation length calves popping out without any assistance, because everything's outwintered here. Our cattle are on deferred grazing and cake through the winter, and there isn't really an option to bring them into a shed. If there's any real problems, we've got a small amount of silage to use, but everything's got to be able to do the job on its own, which is a challenge to some degrees, but it means that you've got to get your genetics right, so you're breeding cattle that can do the job. And management obviously is 50% of the game, and we've been being very nice to them. If you can say being on deferred grazing, which is eating heather and whatever they can find out on the hill and getting a bit of cake, if you can say that's being spoilt, then they're being relatively spoilt. And particularly the heifers who are on their first calf, they're about to come off that and go on to even harder rations to make sure that they really are producing nice, small, easy calved calves that will then be up and sucking, and then we can spoil them rotten and push them to get them growing once the calves are out. So that's a very brief resume of off the cuff of my rugby and farming career thus far. I should point out that I'm very lucky to have a wonderful wife, Romaine, who's not only mother of the 4 kids, 2 of whom are probably giggling through next door listening to this, and also put up with living in some pretty basic conditions over the last 20 years on the Isle of Coll. I'm very lucky to have such a wonderful woman by my side and helping with the farm. And I think there's going to be some reference of mental health, and being part of an amazing 2-person team is the biggest protection you'll get from any mental health problems, in my considered opinion.
Definitely.
We've had a couple of questions come in from Facebook. We'll start with farming and work our way backwards through your career. First question was, how many breeding cows do you have?
We're aiming for 80 to 100, and it kind of comes back to how much can one man realistically handle at the bottleneck points through the year. With the cattle, I really look forward to the calving. Again, having just come through Blue Monday, and I think Blue Monday is mainly a town institution, but I think, it was timed quite well. We had the most horrible day on Monday, weather-wise, and you've come off the highs of, having the family back for Christmas, and there's not a lot to look forward to, bar daylight getting a wee bit longer at the beginning and end of each day. But calving when it starts, and I start calving in February normally. It gives you something to look forward to, and obviously sometimes you're looking forward to something that may be a huge amount of work and a disaster. But when you go out and you count the cattle and you feed them on the dunes or out on the hill, and there's one down and off you go, and sometimes it takes forever to find them tucked in their little hole out the wind, and there's a wee calf there, which it's what farming's all about, certainly livestock farming, and it gives you a big lift as you come out of the middle of winter and Blue Monday, and just hints of spring start to appear. So, in answer to the question, about 80, it varies.
Where did your passion for agriculture come from?
I actually was heading in a completely different direction in my youth, clearly doing medicine. But I used to go and work. My father got me a job in one of the local farms just between Glenalmond and Buckenty, and I worked with the McLaren family who owned the farm. I was working with a chap called Sinclair there, just helping out during the holidays with winter feeding. And Carol McLaren is now, or was with QMS for quite a while. Actually, she was just a young primary school girl at the time, but she's now actually working at Glenalmond College. So that's linked round, and I see a bit of her. And but we got over here, and working with livestock becomes slightly addictive, doesn't it? We had a real motley collection of cows when we started, and sheep. We bought a whole load of blackies, and then realised we didn't want to be in blackies, so we've been crossing ever since. Crossing out of where we started, we had blue greys that we've been turning into lings via Angus and Simmental, and you name it. But I suppose my two great pleasures out of livestock are cattle. I just absolutely love cattle, but I love sheep because then I can work collies, and I love collies.
I think one of the main things with farming, and something that's been in the media quite a lot in the last few years, is sort of how isolated agriculture is. And obviously you're on the Isle of Caul, very, very remote. It's quite important for people to have something outside of farming to work on, a hobby, really good for their mental health. What do you do outside of work? Do you have any hobbies? I heard that you've done a bit of falconry in the past.
I've had a lot of hobbies. I'm a great man for finding things to enjoy outside work. When we first got up here, I was flying hawks and falcons. I'm extremely keen fisherman as well. When I finished with professional rugby, the last thing you want to do is spend any time exercising. You want to go and escape and do all the things you weren't able to do, and particularly to go fishing. I love my fishing, but of late I've got caught up, as I said, exercising professionally. When I finished, I didn't want to exercise at all, so I didn't do anything from 1999 really until into 2012 when someone stuck me on a bike for a charity event, and I got an instant wow off riding a road bike. I remember exactly where it was. It was an event where we were riding from Edinburgh in relay, from Edinburgh to London to Cardiff to Dublin and back to Edinburgh. And somewhere in just over the border in the Northumbrian hills, I think I can even picture the caravan park way up in the top of the hills on the A68. I got on a road bike, and it was an instant wow. And so I've been cycling hard ever since. So yeah, I've got plenty to keep me busy outside the farm.
Great. I'm actually really glad you mentioned fishing, because I had an interesting conversation with Scott Hastings earlier. So he was telling me about your tour. It was the Scotland tour to Australia. I think you were in Darwin in 92. And you were a few floors up and you had your fishing rod. And you discovered that the Australian ladies hockey team were a few floors below you. So you decided to have a wee competition as to who could catch the most underwear that was hanging up in the women's balcony.
Scott clearly borrowed my tackle for that, but it does take me to another very funny story, because we were in Darwin, and Kenny Milne and myself, Kenny Milne was a Scotland hooker at the time, and I had my rod, and he was a keen fly fisherman as well. So we said we'd go fishing out in the sea, and we could see, you could see a lot of action going on out to sea. And we started to wade out onto these flats, and there were these kind of druggy looking hobo types lying on the beach. And they were shouting across to us, and they were going, "You can't go in there. You can't go in there." And we were kind of muttering under our breath, "We'll go wherever we bloody want," And we went out and we fished away. We had a great time and caught a few wee fish. And we came back in and we told someone what we'd done, and they looked absolutely horror struck. And they said, "God, you're lucky to be alive." there's salties, saltwater crocodiles there, and box jellyfish, which if they brush your leg, you die very painfully. So Kenny Milne's always held it against me that I took him out and put him in such danger in the seas off the Northern Territories in Australia.
Hi, Monty here again. Sorry to just interrupt proceedings here. I know I said that I'd hand the show over. Just a quick point I'd like to make about young farmers and the effect that lockdown is having on SAYFC and the local young farmers clubs throughout Scotland. I think the clubs, they do a great job. They do a great job in combating rural isolation and loneliness, bringing young people together. Obviously, in lockdown, that isn't physically possible, but things like this evening's chat with Rob Wainwright and other virtual events do keep the ball rolling. But they do struggle as well because, they can't physically do the fundraising efforts, etc., that they would normally do, both for their own club funds, SAYFC funds, and the charity work they do. And basically, I guess this is just a bit of a plea to say, in some ways, remember, charity begins at home. If you are an ex-young farmer like myself and you want to maybe get involved with the Friends of Young Farmers scheme, which will allow you to support your local club and SAYFC, please look at their website and get some more information about the Friends of Young Farmers membership. Please try and help, because if we lose our clubs, if we lose the young farmers movement, we lose much more than that. We lose glue that keeps young people together in rural areas, and we lose this army of people who are willing to go that extra mile for charity and support things like Doddy Aid and RSABI and other charitable work. So please remember that, and please try and support young farmers as well as everything else that needs a bit of support at this difficult time. Thanks.
Mental health's become talked about more openly within agriculture. It's a real issue, the number of suicides within the agricultural industry. It's well known that regular exercise is great for the body and the mind, and your most recent movement with Doddy Aid has not only been a great fundraiser, but it's also been a great support for those that are struggling through the pandemic. Do you want to tell us a bit about Doddy Aid? Yeah,
Doddy Aid is, there's two parts to this question, really. There's I probably deal first with exercise and well-being, and I'm a huge fan of that. I certainly get a real lift from doing exercise. It's not necessarily always fun to do it outside, but now I've got it's mainly cycling I do, and I've got a static bike inside, and it's a very important part of my weekly schedule is to have 3 or 4 nice rides a week, and I do feel it's extremely good for your well-being, and I would encourage anyone to factor it into your life, to make it a priority. It is rather than being something that's tagged on if there's time. I certainly try and build it into my schedule, which my wife can find frustrating, but I think it's good for me. And in terms of keeping going as a farmer and lifting up 25 kilo stacks, well into my 60s, I think exercise is a very important part of the future investment for the farm. So that's how I justify it. But in terms of Doddy Aid, I don't think I need to say anything to the people listening about how we all feel about Doddy. He's an inspirational character in a very Scottish way, in that we are all uplifted by the courage and fortitude he's shown in dealing with his diagnosis. But we love a sense of humour in Scotland, and the fact that he can do the whole thing, always looking for the next joke and with a smile on his lips at all times, is an immensely attractive set of attributes. And Doddy is just an icon now of MND fundraising. He has raised, or caused to be raised, £7 million now for MND research and support for people with MND in Scotland. So he's done amazing things, and my hope is that some of the treatments, obviously we've had great news this week that there's been a potential breakthrough in identifying a problem with mitochondria in the neurons and repurposing drugs. These are drugs that have been used for other purposes, which they may not have been very good at, but they've passed all the safety checks, and they can be used to they can be very quickly implemented if they're proven to have the desired effect. So very exciting, and partly funded. This research was partly funded by My Name's Doddy Foundation. So Doddy was diagnosed 4 years ago, and it gives me a huge amount of satisfaction and pleasure to do things to raise money for it, as I'm sure is the same for many of the people listening, because the support he has had from the rural community in Scotland has been fantastic. We started off, the first thing we did was an exercise challenge. It didn't quite take off the way that Doddy Aid has taken off, but 3 years ago we did that, and we ended up with a march of 1,000 headbands in Rome. Probably, the most exciting moment I can remember from the Doddy fundraising was turning up to Piazza del Popolo with a bag of 1,000 headbands to be confronted by 3,000 people all wanting them. And it was a bit like the second last scene of Trading Places, if you've seen that film, Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, where they're on the New York Stock Exchange floor and they sell it manically. And we were almost drowning in people who were waving cash or phone with proof of their donation at us. And then there was the bag is empty, and all the people saying, "Where's my headband? I've paid for it already." But it was a great moment. We're coming up with other crazy things to try and encourage people to get involved and donate. A week on Saturday, we're doing a world in a day. This is with Mark Beaumont, who cycled around the world in 80 days 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now. And we're going to, instead of doing it 80 days, we're going to try and get 80 people from each of the district teams in Doddy to do 240 miles, or teams of people to do 240 miles in the day on the 30th of January. So anyone that is listening that fancies doing 60 miles with 3 mates, or any real nutters want to do 240 miles or between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. on Saturday the 30th. I'm seeing 2 Bruntons here, not meeting my eye. But we've got that coming up, and then we finish up the whole event on kickoff for the Calcutta Cup. I'm fundraising for a great friend who's needing help, and the whole, as I said, the whole of the rural community has reacted so positively to Doddy's call to arms, and I think we will see significant effects from that.
We've just a couple of more questions for you, and then we'll have to wrap it up. But so yeah, I've got one that I've been dying to ask all night. What moisturiser do you use, or do you do a Shania Twain and rub the udder oil on?
What moisturiser do I use? Hebridean Sea Air, I think, is the answer to that. So, and soap when I wash. That's about it. So, fresh air, and exercise. No moisturiser, I'm afraid. I could have done with a shave before coming on air. Sorry about that.
I was going to ask you, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oh wow, that's I could be earnest about it and repeat many of the wisdoms that we've discussed tonight about being positive. But I suppose the advice I would give anyone, including my 20-year-old self, is aim high and chase your dreams. And what seems like a mountain to climb when you set off on any venture, if you take it in steps, these small victories that we discussed earlier on, mountains can shrink to being quite small as you climb up them. So set your sights high. If you don't hit your goal, whatever your goal is, you're still going to end up a lot higher up the mountain than you would have been if you decided not to try at all. So, yeah, dream big and aim high and set yourself some pretty ambitious goals and chase your dream.
Well, thank you very, very much for giving up your time tonight. It's been a pleasure hearing all about your life, and I'm sure everyone will agree. I think we'll end it there. We'll let you go and have your dinner. I know you've been it's been waiting for a while.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Monty here again. I'm just going to pick up for a minute at the end and just say thank you very much to Ali and Leanne Brunton. What a brilliant job. Well done. You put me to shame. And also what a great chat with Rob Wainwright, the Doddy Gump fundraising founder. What a guy. I just want to, as we always do, say a quick thanks to all of those we've spotted recently sharing and saying nice things about us on social media. There's our good friend Martin Dare of Rural Projects, Amanda Brown at SOS, the Scotland Food and Drink Twitter account, Robert Logan, Heather Wildman, and I'm sure many, many more. We're so grateful. As always, it really helps to spread the word. Now, just before I go, you might not know this, Doddy Weir is a farming neighbour of mine, and one of the first on-farm podcasts I was ever involved in, way back last year, it seems like ages ago now, when we launched, was a chat with Doddy. Gosh, I was nervous. Maybe I still sound so nervous when I record these, but hey-ho. But yeah, way back last year, I decided to go and knock the door of the big man, and we had a great chat.
We've got some store cattle in now. I do like to have a bit of cattle around the place, so store calves back in to see how they go.
We were talking about that on the way up here, Doddy. We used to see you racing around here on a two-wheel motorbike, and that was you checking your stock and what have you, and it is hard that you're not able to do that now.
Well, you see that though, Monty. You see, this is where I think it's all wrong, because it's adapting to the issue. So maybe don't go on a two-wheel motorbike. We've got a four-wheel motorbike that we have a shot on and don't give it. But again, that was getting a bit hard. I got stuck in the bank another day because my thumb's quite weak to try and pull it. So we've got a four-wheel drive machine now just to allow me to go out and go around the stock.
If you want to go back and listen to it, it was number 5 in the On-Farm series. I think you might understand why it was number 5. A big special number, rather, for Doddy. So I suppose with that, that's it from me, and bye for now. See you next time.